Welcome to Unapologetically Yours, a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world where we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Hello. Welcome to the latest episode of the Unapologetically Yours podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am so grateful that you're here with me today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are, just kicking off this podcast. We've launched, fewer than 10 episodes so far and getting our groove. And I have to say that I have been so overwhelmed by how it has been received so far and all of the messages and notes of support. So thank you so much. It means the world. The labor of love that goes into launching a podcast is pretty significant, from the little things like picking a jingle that represents the tone of the podcast to designing the graphics, the cover, getting it launched in all of the places. So I am so grateful for my team at Yak Yak for supporting me through this. And I'm also so grateful for you guys for tuning in. Thank you. It really does mean the world. Today, I wanted to talk about the importance of connection and building community. The thought started because my son just turned 4 years old, and he was a pandemic baby. He is my little meatball, and having a baby in May 2020 was no joke. It was something that changed me in so many ways. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that, and then talk a little bit about what we can learn from the pandemic and how we can foster more community with one another now that we have the chance to do so. And it really does make all of the difference how we show up in the world, and we are all connected, and that's something that I believe deeply. How I show up and my energy has an impact on the people around me, and how you show up and your energy has an impact on you and those around you. So having that awareness is so important. So let me take you back. Let me take you back to May 2020. As you know, the world shut down March 13th-ish of 2020, and the world went remote. We didn't know what was going to happen. My daughter's birthday is March 29th, and I remember that we had this drive-by birthday thing, and where she, like all of the relatives, came by in our driveway singing happy birthday. She couldn't get hugs. They were like dropping presents out the window because we didn't know what to expect. And all of a sudden, the people that we'd been around without fear or without concern were suddenly considered dangerous. And we had to start thinking about what people's behaviors were in their lives and what they were doing and how they were, what their safety protocols looked like and who they were around, if they were traveling, all of the many, many, many questions that we had to ask ourselves and ask each other. And it was exhausting, and it was emotional, and it was hard, and it was disappointing, and it fostered opportunity for growth and connection and conversation, but it also really left so many of us in a state of just doing the best that we could with the information that we had at the time. And truly, that's what it came down to, is that we were all just doing our best with the information that we had at the time. And looking back, I think many of us would do things differently, but being a business owner in a super blue state while pregnant and a mother of 3, I was wearing soon to be 3, I was wearing just so many different hats and had to consider so many different viewpoints and perspectives. And also noting that we are very close to family members who are elderly, and the state of mind that I was in coming up on the birth of my 3rd child was a state of just despair. Truthfully, if I'm being honest, it was a time of despair. I remember being on a Zoom call with my OB/GYN and just sharing with her that I was drawing from an empty cup, that I did not have a lot to fill my cup. I wasn't spending time with girlfriends, obviously wasn't partaking in all of the fun that people were having, imbibing in the pandemic, just chugging wine. I was pregnant. So wasn't doing that. Had to really worry about what was the well-being of my team, who so many of them were living in studio apartments in downtown Chicago, maybe working remotely side by side with their partners, and any number of different circumstances, or they were parents trying to navigate homeschooling and all of the changes that were happening all at once. And we were trying to figure out if our business was going to survive and how to shift fundraisers that we were planning for some of our nonprofits to become virtual events. And it was just on and on and on and on. So my baby was due June 11th. And I know that because it was my best friend's birthday. And I had a 2-year-old. I had a 4-year-old who, and I just, at that point, I was like, I'm not going to do preschool e-learning for pre-K for a 4-year-old. We just did our best with entertaining her and getting her out and about and getting her outside to the extent that we could in, Chicago spring. But at that point, the weather was getting warmer. It was coming on Memorial Day weekend. And while we weren't able to spend the time with family in the same way that we wanted to, at least we could be outside. And at least we had started to be able to see people a little bit more regularly with precautions. But while other people were kind of coming out of the lifting the veil, this was like pre-Delta variant setback, they were still separating mothers from babies. And I was so deeply concerned that I was going to contract COVID-19 and be separated from my baby. And I'm a big supporter and proponent of breastfeeding. And that's something that I nursed both of my first 2 babies for over a year, and believe very much in the antibodies that come from breast milk. And it didn't make any sense to me that you would separate a mother from an infant, from a newborn, when they'd been in the same, body ecosystem. So, but I didn't want to deal with that. And I didn't want to argue, and I didn't want to face like a hospital legal team. Anyway, the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And the fears that we have. But this one was actually, pretty friggin' legit. So I was chasing my son on his balance bike. He was 2, while my daughter was on her scooter, and freaking out that they weren't going to stop at a stop sign. And so I was in a dead sprint. And I have big babies, and I had a giant freaking belly. At some point, maybe I'll share that on social, but I was fucking huge. And I remember sprinting down the street after my kids, and then coming back inside, ordering Chinese food. A storm rolled in, and then I went into active labor. And so the contractions came in fast and hot. And so I was 37 weeks at that time. And so went to the hospital, and my husband had to stay in the car while I waited for the doctor to give me word about 2 things. One, was I actually in labor? Were we going to do this thing? I was. And was I positive for COVID-19? And at that time, there was no instant test. So I just had to take the test, and I think it was an hour. So active labor, knew that I was having a C-section because I had a C-section with my second child. And so there was a kind of an emergent situation of like, okay, like labor's progressing. What are we going to do? And then as soon as the test came back negative, like into the OR we went. And I remember walking down the hall and like not even knowing what we were going to call this little baby. And we didn't know the gender either. And so Samuel was born, and has, been one of my greatest joys ever since. But, having a C-section is a really brutal surgery. And I, for those of you who've been there, I mean, really, it's absolutely awful. And for those of you who've supported mothers through C-sections. It's really hard. And especially when you've got two little kids who still want to be held and babied, because they are babies. A 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, they're babies. So they kicked us out of the hospital in like less than 48 hours. And the good news is that this particular establishment, I didn't have to like labor in a mask or anything like that. And after testing negative, we were able to not wear masks in the room. Funny note, though, my husband didn't have to test. The nurses didn't test. So it's like, I don't know exactly what the safety protocol was and if it really made any difference. But alas, you live and you learn COVID-19. So what was the hardest part, I think, about having a baby during this time was the lack of available support and lack of being able to go out and refill my cup. I needed community. I wanted friendships. I wanted to spend time with people who could help me recharge my battery, who could just come over and clean my kitchen, bring food, do the things that new moms need for support, play with my kids. And we just didn't have that. And I think we got a taste of how our culture has been really trending towards more individualism, individual households, not having multiple generations living together, not having this village. And we're out there, everyone's talking about this village, but we're not creating a society that's conducive to showing up for each other necessarily. And what I mean by that is that, we go back to work right away. Maternity leaves aren't something that we don't really spend a lot of time. I'm going to give the example specifically on new moms, but nurturing them in the way that they should. And, the puppies have better postpartum rights than human mamas. That's not the point of this discussion, although there's lots and lots and lots I want to talk about in that regard. So I missed connection. I missed community. And one of the things that I did to sort of memorialize this time was because I couldn't have a little sip and see or invite my girlfriends over to fawn over this beautiful, beautiful baby. And really, he was so fucking cute. But I set up a photo shoot with one of my friends who is an incredible photographer and just a muse of women. She has this ability to capture women in their essence in such a fantastic way. And so I contacted, her name is Maggie Rife Ponce, and she is owner of a company called Revealed Studios. She's also co-owner of a space that I hold many events at called Lay Loft in downtown Chicago. And so we set up a photo shoot in the woods, and I brought my newborn. I wore this beautiful white dress and had the chance to just capture him and me in these early stages of motherhood in this time that was just so unprecedented. And I longed for community. I longed for that connection. And the thing that was interesting about COVID, and I think that we all can feel this, is there wasn't a day of silence. There wasn't a day of rest. There wasn't even really much of a transition to say, hey, y'all, we did it. We are over this hump, and we can now go on about our days. We can now just resume business as usual. Instead, it was just kind of wait, we can take off masks now? And what are the rules? And are we okay? Are we safe? And no real moments of gratitude for all of the decisions that we had to make as a household, as households throughout America, throughout the world, to keep our families safe, and what kind of trauma that placed on all of us, how we relate to one another, how we show up for each other, how we connect. And I think that the damage of that is pretty significant. And I think about how we can start to bring some of that community back. And that's what I want to talk about today, is now the pandemic is over, and here we are. We have all these opportunities for connection, and I think we've all been kind of slow to recover from that because we don't know how to show up. There has been so much fear placed between us, and so much division, and so many things that have happened culturally that have made our kind of bounce back a little bit a little bit slow. So I started thinking about the key tenets of connection and how we can build more community with one another and how we can foster those relationships with ourselves, because it's not just about, if we're thinking about how we're all connected as in a village, we're all connected as in a society, we're all connected as people. We have to remember that we are all people and that we are all one and that we are all together. And so one of the things that that I think about a lot is just like ways to lead with love, ways to foster community, ways to foster connection. And I think not the number one thing, but one easy thing, an easy behavior change is to just say hello, smile, make eye contact, engage with people. So whether you're walking down the street in your town and you're out on a walk, I mentioned before, I love to take walks, and I try to say hello to those who are walking past me. And it's so easy to just get like lost in La La Land or in our phones or just in like that insecurity of like, do I say hello? Do I not? And it is so important to just say hello. Or just at least smile and acknowledge one another. Just that simple gesture of remembering that the person coming towards you is a human being. They are someone who has their own experiences. We don't know what they are always, and sometimes maybe we do, but we don't know what someone has just gone through in their day. And to make them to remind ourselves that that is a person who has feelings and is worthy of eye contact, worthy of recognition as another human, is just such a basic thing. Now, I'm not talking about like smiling and shaking hands with every person on the subway or walking down busy city streets, but more along the lines of like when you're walking down your own street, when you are in a common place of business or working towards a common goal, engage and interact with the people around you. So this could be at the starting line of a race. This could be checking out at the grocery store, making eye contact, smiling and saying hello, acknowledging the other person is just a wonderful way to remember that we are all human and we are all connected. And to also just like get the fuck out of our own heads. Get out of your head. And remember, okay, come back to this planet. We are here. We are people, and we are worthy of seeing and experiencing each other. So for me, I have also gotten into a lot of trouble in public places. I remember like riding the red line in the city. When I say the city, I'm referring to Chicago. In my 20s and like making eye contact with someone who's clearly on drugs, and like someone smacked me once, someone chased me. I've had all sorts of weird things happen. So I'm not talking about situations that will put you in danger, but I'm talking about when you are in the state of commonality as in the human experience and showing up with, you're moving in the same direction. Acknowledge one another and take that moment to foster connection. One of the things, too, that is really cool about this, I have found, is that the more that I do this, the more doors open for me and people who are meant to be in my life walk in. And so that might be a mom who turns out that they live in my neighborhood that I met in the checkout line at the grocery store. And then that person ends up being a close friend with one of my kids. There are so many different instances where the universe is connecting us with people. And when we stop and look around a little bit, it helps us to remember again that we are all connected. So the other thing is like being present in each moment. So this can be in showing up for a Zoom call or walking into a store, or checking out at the grocery, or whatever your situation you're entering into, taking a moment to pause, take a deep breath, and transition into the next thing. So this for me is like, we are so scheduled in our daily lives. We are so scheduled. Like I know my work days are like in 15-minute increments. And if I'm not, I try to schedule meetings for 20 minutes instead of 30 so that I have a 10-minute window to like take a deep breath, close out my feelings about that experience, and then move with intention into the next. And that's something that's just one way of being present with the people that you're interacting with and not dragging all of this baggage from the previous interaction into your next interaction, so that you can be present, be intentional, show up, and then see the human in the person that you're meeting with or engaging with. And it's so hard to do that when you have just like hung up the phone and maybe there was things in that conversation that needed to be resolved or unpacked or just need to just like take a beat. And when you don't do that, you're carrying all of that energy with you into the next situation, and it prohibits you from fostering that deeper connection with someone who might be on the receiving end. Again, maybe it's someone in the grocery store line, maybe it's someone that you're having a Zoom meeting with through work. And I'm a big fan of breath work and just taking a few deep breaths to transition. So just a quick inhale, exhale, and then think about what you want to accomplish in the next meeting or the next interaction. Set that intention. Obviously, this varies depending on what kind of interaction you're looking for. It's different if you're going into the grocery store, not necessarily setting an intention of like, I am going to connect deeply with every person that I meet with. But it does apply when you're meeting people for work, professionally, or your friendships with your family members, to just handle those transition with a little bit of grace and a little bit of intention, so you can show up as with presence, because that presence is also how you foster connection, and your energy is something that will impact the next person. If you show up frazzled, if you show up incomplete, inattentive, without presence, the person on the receiving end of that will feel it. So then presence also translates to how those interactions take place when you are in front of someone. And I think that being present is about asking questions. It is about thoughtfully listening. It is about listening with intention. And for me, I even take it one step further, and it's about going beneath the surface and having the courage to connect with authenticity. And I think about this in terms of, I have a great friend. Her name is Debbie. She passed away in 2020 of uterine cancer. Just another bullshit thing that happened during the pandemic, where I wasn't able to properly say goodbye or grieve that loss. But the best thing about Debbie was that anytime we would have an interaction, it would be just so raw and so authentic. And her showing up that way, it gave me permission to then show up in the same way. So what does that mean exactly? I remember we had plans, and it was like December 2019, and she was like, babe, I'm sorry, I've got to cancel on you. Shitstorm, listed all of the things. Didn't make up an excuse, didn't anything, just shitstorm, yada, yada, yada. And my reply was, I'd canceled on you 2 weeks ago, but I just forgot to tell you. And we laughed, and there was every single interaction that we had was like that. But when someone asks you how you are, just going, good, I'm fine, thanks, how are you? That's not a way to foster connection. But you also, I recognize, don't want to be a downer and unload all of your life secrets to someone at the checkout counter at Kramer's. But we do want to give people a little bit of the truth, so that they have the permission to show up in truth too. And humor is a great way to do this. And, commiserating about certain things like the end of May and what an absolute shitstorm it is for working parents trying to manage all of the programs and all of the other things. And then connecting the dots of the other conversations and the things that you do know about someone, and just having that presence of mind to ask them how the new job was going, ask them about the parent who is facing, a disease, and checking in on the kid that that they've been struggling with. All of those things, how we show up, and using that authenticity is just a wonderful way to give people permission to meet you where you are and give you a window to meet people where they are and foster those deeper connections to build a stronger community. And it's okay to go deep. It's okay to take that extra few minutes with someone and share and be supportive. And sometimes the best way to show up for someone is to just listen, to not advise, not provide should statements, just to listen with intent. So beyond that, acts of kindness are so important. And acts of kindness can be anything from a follow-up text to, hey, how you doing? We had this conversation. I know you were struggling with this. What's going on? Or just checking in with someone who you haven't connected with in a while, seeing how they're doing. Just when you think of someone, they pop into your mind, and giving them that encouragement. When you see someone who's launching something new, like a podcast, sending them a note if you appreciate it. And by the way, I want to say thank you so much for all of the people who have done that for me. It really means the world to know that people are showing up and supporting one another. And that's just dropping off a meal for someone who's just had a baby, dropping off broth for someone who's going through treatment. There are any number of ways for us to show acts of kindness for one another. And oftentimes I think we get a little bit self-conscious about that. Like, oh, are they going to think I'm weird? Or or do I have time? Make the time. And that can, like I said, look like a lot of different ways. You don't have to throw someone a bridal shower to show them that you care about their marriage. You can show up for people in so many different ways. And I saw this recently. I was driving through a nearby town by the train, and it was pouring rain, and the rain kind of came out of nowhere. There was this old man walking along and just getting completely soaked. And a woman who I didn't get the impression that she had known this man at all, pulled over next to him, grabbed an umbrella out of her own car, ran and handed it to him, and then got back in her car. And I was just blown away by this act of kindness to a stranger, to someone who is clearly in need, and how incredibly moving it was that this woman would, get out of the car, hand him an umbrella with no expectation of getting anything back. She didn't share her name. They didn't have a conversation. She just handed it to him. You could see that she just insisted that he take it, and then got back in her car. And that was something, observing it, that was so powerful to me and made me truly weep. I weep. I'm a weeper. When I do cry, I let it out. I let it flow. And this was something that touched my heart so much. And that was with a stranger. And another example of this was something that just happened recently. My daughter performed in the school talent show, and she played the crystal singing bowls. And they're really cool. There's 7 bowls. They're each tied to a chakra within our body. And the sound bowl, the singing bowls, can be used for meditation or energy clearing. And it's something that I've really brought home over the last couple of years. And my kids have tuned in and loved it, and have their friends come over and play. And it's really cool. Now, my daughter is so bravely, at 8 years old, got up in front of the whole school and shared this gift that she has of playing the singing bowls. And it was one of the coolest and cutest things that I have ever seen. And after she gave her performance, we're walking down the hall, and she was like, "Mom, did you get me anything?" And so many of the other performers had gotten flowers from their families, and I forgot. I dropped the ball, which was so shitty, because literally my office is above a wonderful flower shop, and I just slipped my mind, ran out of time, and didn't have flowers for her. And it broke my heart. And I'm usually pretty good about balancing, I do a lot. I show up for my kids in a lot of different ways. But this one stung, because I know that it was important to her, and she had just been so brave. And I said, I didn't, Antonia, and I'm so sorry, but let's go get ice cream and we're going to celebrate you. And another mom was walking down the hall and heard our exchange, and her little girl had a big bouquet of flowers, and she took a single rose out of her daughter's bouquet, and her daughter was paying attention. She was tracking this. It didn't faze her, and she handed the rose to Antonia, and oh my gosh, my heart just exploded with so much gratitude for this mom who wasn't trying to shame me, who wasn't trying to do anything but just make my daughter feel seen and special. And I was so appreciative of that, of her in that moment. And it just reminded me so much about how important it is to show up for each other in this sort of singular, isolated society. We oftentimes feel like we have to do it all, especially, again, these working parents that are structured all throughout the day. You've got a million kids' activities. No one's got time for themselves. And here we are, this other mother showing up and serving my daughter in such a beautiful and inspiring way. And that gesture cost her nothing. And she could have stayed kind of sheltered in her own self-consciousness. She could have thought, gosh, I don't want to interfere, and not done it. But the fact that she did it meant the absolute world to me. And I'm so grateful for that. So I think the takeaway with that is that we have control and agency over how we show up for ourselves and others. And there are opportunities throughout each and every single day to do a little act of kindness for someone, whether that's like picking up a piece of litter, or holding the door open for someone, or shooting them a note of encouragement, or liking something that they're doing, or signing up for something that they're hosting. And all of those things really make a difference in fostering community and, again, like building that network of connectedness between people that I know so many of us are craving. And another area that I think is so important as we're diving into what helps to build community, talk a little bit about what can take it away. Like, I think assuming positive intent is a really key tenet of all of this, and leading with love. So, for example, if the mother had, instead of offering that rose, had gone and talked a bunch of shit about me and said something like, oh God, Ashley dropped the ball on this, and she could have done this for her daughter and she didn't, and that's terrible. All the other girls got flowers and she didn't get flowers for her daughter. That would spread so much darkness. And that's just, and the other thing is that when you talk shit about other people, it impacts only you, because it starts to chip away at your own credibility with the people that you're talking about. I don't know if you guys have experienced that too, that when someone's talking shit about someone to you, I immediately start to wonder, like, oh my God, do they talk about me too? And start to wonder about how they're representing me in the world. And so bringing that, first of all, like, first one, assume positive intent. Assume you never know if someone's walking down the sidewalk and they don't say hello to you, that they have just hung up a phone call that rattled them to the core, or just received news that rattled them to a core, or just they're exhausted. Give people the benefit of the doubt, because oftentimes we'll go into like what our own story is about someone, instead of thinking about what might be happening for them. So letting go of the ego, letting go of the insecurity that what they're doing is targeted towards you, and instead just assuming the positive intent that someone is showing up the best that they can with the information that they have each and every single day. And that makes just a world of difference in what you carry as a person, and what you're bringing back to your own network. And thinking again about how you show up in the world is words are spells. So the words that you say about other people, they do come back around. And my mom is just an absolute angel. And she wrote down like this whole words of wisdom book for me and my sisters. And she's always said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And it's so true. You have to assume that anything you say bad about someone is going to get back to them. That's a rule that I live by, and making sure that I try to keep, and I don't want to say just that I am this like high and mighty person. I'm not. I have talked shit. I have confided in people about my feelings, and there's a very world of difference in running situations by other people than being out there gossiping. But trying to just remember that each person is doing their best in the circumstances in their life is the best thing that you can do. And if you do notice that someone is struggling, or you think that they might be struggling, just asking them what you can do to support them, it feels so much better than tearing them down behind their back. Since the pandemic, I have had countless people show up for me in ways that I could never repay. From people attending events, to helping to give me advice, to bringing meals, to helping to take care of my kids, to just words of encouragement. And I am so grateful for each and every person that I have in my life. I feel so lucky. And there aren't enough days or hours in the day, days in a year, for me to repay all of those people. But what I can do is pay it forward. What I can do is think about how I'm showing up in the world, and take these little micro steps to think about my light and my energy, and bring the best version of myself to each interaction, and knowing that I am imperfect, deeply, deeply, deeply imperfect. We all are. And giving ourselves that room to let a little bit of love in, let love breathe, and then move forward with grace, understanding, compassion, and connection, and then see where that takes you. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I am grateful to have you here. I look forward to hearing how this impacts how you show up in the world. And if you've got any other tips, please drop them in the comments. We want to hear. And this is just the beginning. Let's make a bigger list, and let's foster additional connection together so we can shift the vibration of this world a little bit together in community, because we are all connected and we deserve to do this unapologetically. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out, make some mischief in the world. And until then, I'm Ashley, and I'm unapologetically yours.